It's people that speak two languages are so impressive. I don't understand how you do it. I tried to learn German for 7 years, and I managed to learn hello and ni. Not even ni hao. That's a different language.
I think I speak English.
I don't know where that's come from. I'm just thinking of everyone that's gonna. Oh, my mates are gonna clip that.
Yeah. Hello and welcome to the F1 Feeder Series podcast, your guide to keeping up to date on everything in the junior single-seater world. I'm your host, Jim Kimberley, and I don't know about you, but it's been a couple of days off catching a break this week as F1 and most feeder series have had a rare July weekend off. Now, there might not have been any racing this weekend, but there has been plenty going on for our two guests in 2022 and plenty more still to come. So to join me in talking feeder series this week, first, let me introduce a driver who is teammates with last week's guest, an F3 rookie already with a podium, Van Amersfoort's Reece Ushijima. Welcome, Reece. How are you?
What's up? Yeah, like you said, racing an F3 with VAR. Feeling good to be on this podcast. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I presume you probably just joined because, of course, Franco Colopinto saying it's the best podcast in the world and you had to...
Of course.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, word got around the team.
That's the kind of confirmation. Jake Hughes will be joining us soon. We have to wish Jake Hughes, don't we? I have to wish him a recovery. He's out with COVID at the moment, so sending our thoughts that way. But that's getting a little bit in the way because also we've got on the podcast a driver currently competing in British F4, a teenager who tasted success in the British F4 Championship in 2021 and is looking to get more of the same in 2022 with JHR developments. It's F1 Feeder Series Discord superstar, Joseph Loake. Welcome to the podcast.
Hiya, how are you?
Yeah, I'm really well, thank you. How is it to actually join the podcast and be speaking verbally rather than typing on Discord?
Well, it's very rare that I get to speak to people outside of my house. So, yeah, it's good outside of racing, just speaking to people, just having a chin wag. It's good.
Talking about racing is one of my favourite things to do, which is why I do it every week. Finally, let me also introduce a debut appearance for a name regular listeners may be familiar with. He's been a long-time Ask F1FS question asker, but he's here to answer some questions this time around. F1 Feeder Series British F4 editor, Tom Evans. How are you feeling today about being on the other side of the screen?
I'm not feeling too bad, actually. The heat is a bit much, but apart from that, we're getting along fine.
Yeah, let's keep it cool in here because the podcast isn't going to be any grilling for any of you guys. Just here for a good old chin wag about feeder series on this very rare week off from racing. So before we get into it properly, a quick reminder to like, comment and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. If you don't have time to listen or watch every week, you can still find some great short videos on our channel with our best bits. And if you're listening to the audio only version, please leave a review on whatever podcast platform you're using. You can leave a rating on Spotify, and we've received even more since last week. Thank you again. You can also leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, and to entice you in, any reviews we do receive will be read out on the show. Thank you to everybody who rates us. It really does help us out. Right, let's start with Formula 3. It's not a Formula 3 weekend coming up in France, but the last race in Austria represented the halfway point after the sprint race, I think it was, in the season. So I thought we could do some reflection today. Obviously, I have to start with you on this one, Reece. How's 2022 gone so far from your perspective?
The first couple of rounds, in all honesty, were a bit difficult, not having any points and not really having anything to show for kind of as much as I was learning. But, I've had a good past couple of rounds, a bit of good consistency, I think. Grabbing my first points in Barcelona and then being on the podium at Silverstone, in a rookie season, I was very happy with, especially with a new team as well. I think both me learning, the team's learning as well. And like I said, it was a bit disappointing at the start, but I feel like I'm really finding my feet now. So I'm happy with the progress that's being made.
Do you set yourself any expectations when you go into the season? And all the drivers say, "Oh no, it's going to be this, that," and you don't go public with it. But we're halfway through the season now, and I assume you would have said, I want to hit the podium once potentially, things like that. What was there that you were saying to yourself back in March?
Yeah, I mean, I'm so egotistical. I think I could win everything. In all honesty, I needed more experience to be able to get to that point. I still do, and I need to work a lot harder, but. I felt like going into Silverstone, that was kind of my cutoff point, because having raced in British F3 the past 2 years, I've had a lot of experience around Silverstone. So going there, I wanted to, at least be in the top 5. And although, for the future, I think I could have done a lot better, I was still very happy with being on the podium. And throughout the rest of the season, I would kind of expect myself to always be in the top 10, in qualifying. And it's still a lot for me to learn. In the way that F3 qualifying goes, and you have to get one lap down, and I'm still learning a lot on that department, but I have full confidence in myself and the team, because the team's been working really, really hard.
I think egotistical is a funny word to use for it, because you have to be somewhat egotistical to be a racing driver, I believe, but also you're going into a completely different championship. I feel like you've been a bit harsh on yourself, thinking it's not going to be good enough if you don't get the top 10, because you're going in a new championship with 30 minutes to practice a track, simulator work separate, but then straight to qualifying at tracks you're not familiar with in a car that's new to you. So I think you've been a bit too harsh on yourself. So the podium, obviously in Silverstone, a high point. What else are you looking forward to for the rest of the season? Because are you visiting any tracks that you're familiar with? It's obviously helped you so far.
To be honest, I haven't been to any of the tracks that I'm going to be racing on, which is a bit concerning, but I've done a lot of simulator work already. And, I was initially actually planning on doing Formula Renault, or at least before it turned to regional in 2020. And then COVID happened. So it was a lot easier for me to just race inside the country. And I was living in the UK at the time anyway. So, naturally I got pretty comfortable around Silverstone. And the sim's kind of been my friend in terms of learning the other tracks. But from here on out, it's really kind of historic tracks, Monza, places like that. And I'm looking forward to it, because at least I know which way the corners go. But, I'm definitely going against some guys who have a lot of experience around there. And it's a bit funny, because you watch a lot of I started racing when I was 13. So I started a bit late compared to other people. So you watch a lot of these guys that I'm actually racing against now on, YouTube when they're recording or when they're in regional or F4. And then all of a sudden I'm racing against them. And I'm like, oh, this is a bit wild.
Some big names in the championship at the moment. That is, that'd be fun. I didn't realize you were such a late starter as well. I need to move on a little bit, but Joseph, I have to assume that on your way to being a 10-time F1 champion, you'll be heading through Formula 3 at some point. Have you been keeping up to date on what's been going on in Formula 3 this year? And if so, what have been your main takeaways?
To be honest, I probably should watch those categories a lot more. I'm quite almost a bit blind when it comes to that sort of stuff. So I don't know that much, really. So I can't say much, but obviously it's a good championship, lots of names, obviously. You see someone like Zach O'Sullivan down, obviously he had a good result at Silverstone, but obviously most of the time he's been around like the P10 mark, and it kind of shows how good the grid is right now. And obviously, to be at the front of that is quite a good feat.
Yeah, it's double the size of your grid in British F4, I guess. Depth of field, which Reese will be alluding to, very well known, means a lot of cars in there. Is it something that, I don't know if it's too soon to do those sorts of jumps, but do you start planning at this point, Joseph? Like, I'm going to aim to be an FIA F3 by 2024 or something. Do you have a set path that you want to hit?
Kind of. It's a bit tricky for me to kind of do that, because my budget's so tight. We're constantly looking at trying to find the budget just to finish the F4 season for this year. So, to move up to FIA F3, which is obviously a much bigger budget even then, it would be quite tricky. But obviously, you just got to keep trying to find that budget. And if the opportunity arises, then I'll take it with both hands, that's for sure.
Yeah, I'm sure you will. But yeah, it's one of those constant points of conversation on the podcast: budget, and cost. And yeah, it's very, very unfortunate. Tom, in Formula 3, the championship is so super tight at the top. You got Victor Martins, Isaac Hadjar, Arthur Leclerc, all very close. We know the championship can change at any moment. Who else is impressing you in F3 this year?
I think, obviously, you mentioned Isaac Hadjar. He's one of the 4 rookies in the top 10 in the standings at the moment. But the other 3 rookies, Zach O'Sullivan, Franco Colopinto, and Ollie Behrman, they're all, I think, faring really well in their first seasons. O'Sullivan always seems to be outperforming his machinery. You know, his teammates haven't scored any points yet, and he's already scored more points than the whole team did last season. So that's definitely pretty impressive. Ollie Behrman's always up near the podium. He's getting points pretty much every race. So to be on that level in your rookie season is also really impressive. And then Franco Colopinto getting pole in your first F3 race with a brand new team especially is definitely a statement. So I think that if he moves up to S2 next season, then I think he'll do well there. But if he stays for another F3 season, I think the chances of him challenging for the title will be really high. Yeah,
there are some names. We saw it going into this year, some of the names that were doing well last year in their rookie season, and then unsurprisingly, they're doing so well this year. Franco, yeah, well, you know him very well, Reese, and coming out of the blocks for Van Amersfoort, how much of a signal of intent was that? Like, did that impress you that you could go and get pole position in that first race that Tom correctly mentions?
Yeah, obviously, I was very happy for the team. It was a bit annoying kind of hearing on the radio, oh yeah, you're P20 and your teammate's P1. I messed up in qualifying then, but you know, I think for the team in general, it was a very positive and encouraging result, just because I think if we all struggled in qualifying, then we would all kind of have our like head in our hands and, you know, not know a direction to go to. But with him being able to, you know, pull a result, I think it was definitely beneficial in terms of the direction that we were going.
You've got now Van Amersfoort. I'm just looking through. You've been one of them as well. 3 podiums in there, the pole position. As a rookie team, I feel like we've turned into the Van Amersfoort podcast the last couple of weeks. But in all seriousness, though, you have to kind of give a shout out to how well you guys are doing as a rookie outfit with the drivers that have gone in there. It's not like you were picking up some like Victor Martins level drivers who you knew were probably going to be at the top of the championship this year. You must be quite impressed, irrespective of that egotistical side.
No, yeah, 100%. I think I was very fortunate for them to actually pick me, you know, for Tom and everyone else at VAR to even consider me for the drive this year. And I knew in the off season, seeing how well everyone worked and the work ethic that everyone had, that, you know, we'll have results here and there. I am very surprised with how well and how quickly it's happened, but I think it's more of a positive and kind of well expected surprise.
Yeah, I'd echo that. It's not like I try and go for any particular favourites or anything, but seeing rookies and new teams do well. Obviously, Van Amersfoort aren't a new team in terms of racing, but in terms of Formula 3, big deal for that. Just some final points on F3 at the moment from you, Reese. What should we expect from you from the championship going into the final few rounds? Because we're halfway through the season, but once you hit Spa, it's like 2 weeks later, you're done. That's crazy.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to the triple header. It is a triple header, right?
Yeah, it's. I'm not looking forward to it because I'm going to be exhausted. These double headers are doing me in.
Yeah, I feel like for everyone it'll be exhausted, but it's a good experience from my side. You know, you need to be always thinking about the next race. I think I have a lot to improve on, but my expectations for myself is to be consistently in the top 10. And working, you know, maybe not being on the podium in the feature race, but, you know, being able to do something in the sprint race and mainly just, you know, putting some results to my name and showing everyone what I'm made of.
After the season finishes, like you've got that big blast. So you've got now coming up, you've got one race, Budapest, then you've got the month break, and you've got essentially 2 weeks. It's like 3 weeks, but 2.5 weeks realistically of just churning those races through. What happens then? Because that's like a bit of a come down. Mid-September, potentially, assuming you're doing F3 next year or whatever you do next year, you've now got like 6 months. Like, what do you fill the time with?
I do a lot of KZ, so like shifter kart racing, and that's definitely some really good training. I do that both inside the UK, and hopefully I'll be doing a couple races in the States again later in the winter. And to be honest, just a lot of that, a lot of sim, and I think going into the season, I had a bit of a injury in my shoulder, and I've still been rehabilitating that a little bit. So I still have a bit to work on there, and that's pretty much what my winter is going to be consistent of. But, you know, spending time with my family and kind of taking some time off.
6 months off, just casually, these racing drivers, eh? What you like? F3 wasn't the only championship at its halfway point in the last round, or its last round. Joseph British F4 also went past the 50% mark when Croft finished. I asked Reese this, so I think it's only fair to ask the same question. How do you feel 2022's gone for you?
Well, very up and down. I mean, obviously, with it being my second year in the championship, I kind of wanted to really hit the ground running. But obviously, with the new Tatus T421 being introduced this year, it was always going to be quite a big challenge for us as JHR with such a small budget in comparison to the likes of Carlin, things like that. That, you know, they've got so much money to just throw at it that they've basically nailed their cars from the offset. So we've been struggling a lot in terms of just getting the car in the window, and I think that's what's affected us quite a lot. Obviously, we realised at Croft that through the corners we were probably the fastest out there, and then down the straights I was doing nearly half a second every single straight, and it was really, really tricky, not only to qualify in a good position but also to race. And we assume that we've had that same issue for the whole season. So it's kind of a season of what if so far. Obviously, we don't know what could have been if we'd have had the same machinery, things like that, but you know, we just got to keep focused on what we can do and see if we can keep it going in the second half of the year, but start to get some good results.
You mentioned the new car there as well. And does it feel like you're going into a new championship this year? Obviously, the same similar tracks, but with the new car, does that feel like it's, you know, moving from British F4 to GB4, that sort of thing, because it's not the same as what you were doing last year? Yeah,
it's completely different, especially with how different these cars are. We went from such a soft, you know, floaty my goal to probably the stiffest car there is at the moment. It doesn't ride a single bump properly. So we went into the season trying to, you know, soften it down, be able to ride the bumps so that we wouldn't be bouncing everywhere, and it just didn't work. So then we went back to square one, then started going in a different direction, and we're still trying every direction we can think of. But for some reason, no matter what we do, we end up with the same lap time. So it's very strange. I think we did a 2-day test at Croft, and we went from one extreme to the other on cars. We had all three of us go completely different ways, me and my teammate, and we literally did the exact same lap time every time. So it was very frustrating, obviously, knowing that we'd tried so much and nothing seemed to change anything. So yeah, like I say, we've just got to hope that sometime we find that little sweet spot, that we find that extra bit of time, and yeah, then we'll be in the ballpark.
Yeah, so much extra work that goes on away from just what you see on television, or when you're actually at the races watching the cars go around. You're working non-stop. It's been a while, Tom, since the podcast really spoke about British F4, and that was when a certain Irishman that some might have heard of called Alex Dunn joined the podcast way back in May, and there's only one round down. He's done pretty well, I think it's fair to say, since then. But what else can you tell us about the season in British F4?
Yeah, I'll do a little rundown of the championship for you. It's been pretty uncontested for Alex Dunn at this point. He's won at least one race every round, which is just incredible consistency from himself and High Tech. So he's sitting with a gap of more than 50 points at the top of the standings, which it's looking like he's unbeatable at the moment. Obviously, anything can happen if he's a bit inconsistent or the team's performance drops off slightly. But at the moment, the championship title is looking pretty confirmed already. P2 is also, there's a large gap between P2 and P3. Ollie Gray is sitting 39 points clear of Ugo Unguchuku at P3. The battle between P4 and P9 is much closer. So P4, P5 is currently occupied by Aidan Neat and Lewis Sharp at P5. They're pretty close, actually. Their performances have kind of been changing each round. Lewis Sharp did miss the first round due to the minimum age limit of this season set by the FIA. P6 to P9 is the closest of the standings so far. Daniel Guinchard at P9 is only 12 points ahead of P9. I think Joseph is in that range somewhere. Mm-hmm. So anyone could really end up with P6 at this point. It's very close. So even one DNF could put you to the bottom of that kind of level. Teams Championship is looking completely different from last year. The new chassis has really shifted the order. As Joe mentioned, JHR being a smaller team, don't quite have the budget of the higher teams like Carlin and Virtuosi. So they've dropped back slightly. They're currently battling for P3 alongside Argentini, who came second last year. So that gap in performance because of the chassis is pretty clear to see. Carlin, as I said, currently leading the standings, followed by High Tech, I believe. Yeah, that's right, High Tech. And then the Rookie Cup is, well, if you take away Alex Dunn and Ollie Gray, you pretty much got the Rookie Cup order. Most of the rookies are within the kind of P4 to P9 kind of standings, and then a few more towards the bottom. Overall, it's been a pretty action-packed season. Every round has had some great overtakes, some great racing. So the new chassis has definitely improved, not only on the safety of the drivers with the implemented halo, but also the performance of the cars. Joe mentioned again that they're much more grounded this year. The aerodynamics are much stronger. So the drivers that did most of the rounds in F4 UAE will know the car better. So they will have a distinct advantage because they've raced these cars before. So yeah, it's been a pretty busy season so far.
Yeah. Is there any... I've also done some bit of coverage about it and it has been extremely busy. But is there any reason that you can believe why Alex Dunn is the sole high-tech driver that's doing so well? It seems to be like in a league of his own. And, well, it's the Carlin boys following up after, which, as you mentioned, Joe, is not too surprising, just with these teams being better funded, let's say. Is there any particular reason you think, Tom, why that's the case?
I'm not really sure, to be honest. Obviously, Alex is a brilliant driver. He did supremely well he did 9 races in ADAC F4 and Spanish F4. Last year, he won. I think he either won or got pole in his first Spanish F4 race, which is very, very impressive. So the talent of Alex is clearly a factor in the time that he's doing so well in the championship. But also the fact that quite a lot of the other teams like Argentini, JHR are so close together, it means that quite often the top teams like Carlin can kind of gap the others as the other teams are fighting for position. So I think that could definitely be a factor in why Alex is streaking ahead at the front.
Reece, you obviously know High Tech pretty well, I would say. That's a fair assessment. Are they just like quite a professional outfit all in all, and you're not too surprised that they'll have a driver doing so well in the championship?
Yeah, I like to kind of consider I grew up there. I spent my first 2 years in car racing with them, and I live in Oxford, so I spent pretty much every day at the workshop, and it doesn't surprise me at all to see them doing very well. No,
well, you were talking about doing high tech and living out there. You're now like a jet-setting superstar going around Europe, all these tracks, but it wasn't that long ago when you were in your second season and not doing the as glamorous going up and down the M6 and the M1. Yeah. Going all around the British motorways. It was BRDC British F3 for you. Very familiar circuits, though, to what we've got in British F4. Do you miss it? Are there any tips for any of those circuits that now you've progressed past that you might want to pass on down to Joe?
European driving is very different to driving on British tracks, but I have to say, places like Oulton Park, if you're good around Oulton, you'll be good around anywhere. Because the first thing, you go from Oulton Park and then you go to Bahrain, and you think, Bahrain, I got the widest track in the world. This is but definitely very different driving styles. I do miss driving in the UK. I feel like with what I know now, I definitely would have done a lot better last year. Last year I made a lot of mistakes, and for it to be my kind of championship year, I could have done a lot better job. And but hindsight is a
hindsight's a wonderful thing. And anything you would say apart from don't get used to the narrow tracks, I guess, for Joseph to say, well, here's a tip: if you take this corner in second rather than third. No, it's a different car, but you get the idea. I don't know how different the British F3 car is to the new British or the GB4 car. Well, aside from the British F4, but how about then? Let me give you something else. What about a good service station to stop off? You guys must have done all this for so long. You'd be complete experts.
I might get banned from saying this, but don't ever go to Cobham. That's a very inside joke. All the M&Ss inside BPs with the breakfast wrap are like the greatest thing you'll ever have, especially on a race weekend. Breakfast wraps with a cappuccino. That's like my pre-race thing.
I love that. That's the sort of top tips you don't get anywhere else. So if you're listening on this, wanting to be a feeder series driver in the future, avoid Cobham services and go to the M&S service stations. You'll be doing fine then.
Exactly.
Hey, it worked for you, right?
Yeah, it worked out all right.
We're obviously past the halfway point of the season, but that means we've also got half of the championship still to run. And there's two gentlemen on the podcast right now who know the series better than most. What else should we expect from British F4 before the Brands Hatch finale in October? Let's start with you on this one first, Joe.
Well, hopefully I'll be further up there. That would be a nice start. But yeah, obviously British F4 has always been one of the most crazy championships there are. They're just the racing's mental, just cars flying everywhere. So obviously I'm hoping that I'll be one to watch out for. Obviously sending moves down the inside, hopefully for the lead. So we'll see what I can get from the rest of the season, I guess.
Is there anything from your side that you're looking forward to, any specific circuits? You got Knock Hill next, I think. Are you familiar with any ones that you're thinking you're going to do really well?
Well, I was hoping I'd do well at Oulton, and it didn't go very well. So, and the same at Donington, because they were both my best tracks going into the year. But obviously that didn't work out well. So, Knock Hill was one of my favourites. We did a test day probably 3 weeks ago now, and it was absolutely torrential rain. But I was just loving life. I just love that track so much, and just how much you're just in the air for is just insane in itself. But yeah, Brands GP as well, Brands Hatch. That's one of my favourites as well. It's just full commitment, like 3 seconds away from being in a barrier every time. So yeah, it's pretty good.
I learned the hard way once.
I was about to say there's some knowing nods there from Reese for anybody who was listening rather than watching.
Turn 8, I was down. I went purple sector 1. And
it's always after a purple.
Yeah, I tried a bit too hard.
From the other side of it, when you're behind the barriers rather than in the barriers, Tom, what have we got to look forward to for the rest of this season?
I'm not too sure, but there are a couple of things which I picked up on. I can imagine that we will see Alex Dunn just continue to dominate the championship. I don't think his skill isn't going to go anywhere anytime soon. And I think that the professionalism and the work ethic of High Tech will definitely keep the team's performance up there. I think that we will start to see some of the rookies this year. So Michael Shin and Noah Lyle, for example. I think they'll start to kind of find their feet a bit more in the championship. So we could possibly see them towards the reverse grid pole, as the reverse grid has changed this year. So it's only the top 10 that get reversed. So I think that the battle for the championship won't be very close, but I think the battle for positions in the midfield will definitely heat up a bit this year.
Yeah, it's been quite the championship so far. Like I said, I've been keeping up to date on it for, unfortunately, not from the viewing side of things all that much, because it's been very difficult to find replays of. I know they've got some which were just on YouTube, but it's been on the back of ITV4 or something, right?
Yeah, it's only on ITV, but it's only on a Sunday. So if there's one race on a Saturday, then you'll only be able to get live timing. But quite often there's two races on a Saturday. So it makes viewing it particularly annoying from an editor's perspective.
I bet, yeah. You'll have to be going up to rainy Knock Hill to watch Joe next time out.
I'll get you a free pass if you want.
Well, I mean, I'll accept the offer if it's there, but I don't think I'm going to any circuits this year, unfortunately. Maybe later in the year, maybe later. We'll see.
Well, that's enough questions from us, because the F1 Feeder Series podcast is for you, viewers and listeners. And we've got a bunch of questions. Once again, thank you, everybody. We're probably not going to get through all of them, but we'll try and get as many as possible as we move on to the part of the podcast where you have your say with hashtag AskF1FS. If this is your first time watching or listening, you can get involved by using the hashtag AskF1FS on Twitter, joining our Discord and using the podcast questions channel, or simply commenting on our YouTube videos and asking whatever it is that's on your mind. Now, this one's from CM Parfait 16, and that's another regular question asker on the podcast. And this one is for Reese. And wants to know, how was the Dubai Autodrome? Is it a place where F1 should race in the future or not? I know you've got a big say in where F1 races, of course.
Yeah, obviously. I think Reese's opinion is up here, you know. But, I raced at Dubai 2 times, once in MRF in my first ever car race, and a couple times in Asian F3. I think definitely for racing, it's a good track, especially the hairpin at the end of the massive straight. But I think the infrastructure has to get a bit better for F1 to be there. You know, there's that massive stadium at turn 1 that's not finished yet. But definitely racing in Dubai is really cool. It's one of those vibes. It's like racing in Vegas, you know, something that's super cool. So I wouldn't mind seeing F1 going there, but Yas Marina is really cool as well.
Yeah, it's one for my bucket list, Yas Marina. And then you did it with those different layouts as well at Yas Marina, like the corkscrew one. Is that right? When you're doing Asian F3? Yeah,
weird. Like completely, you have to like everything you imagine of Yas Marina. That was the first time I think I went there as well. You have to like throw everything away, because it's like you have to turn left as you're going around that flat, right after turn 1. And it's blind, it's downhill, it's super fun, but it's just really weird to the first time you drive it.
Is it like, because people were putting that equivalent in there, like it's like the corkscrew Laguna Seca, which I thought was a bit extreme, because I mean that's an iconic corner, but is it like it sounds like for you it's kind of blind going over a crest?
Honestly, it is like the corkscrew. Maybe not as tight as the corkscrew. I've never actually driven Laguna in person, but I've seen it on the sim. But it is blind, and you're turning downhill, and it's you get that feeling in your stomach, like, oh shit.
I would love to see Formula One do more variations of some of the tracks out there. It was really good. That was it, Sakia Grand Prix, when we did the
outer loop.
The outer loop, that was right. Yeah. Tom, there's a question from Tom Evans Photography here. Maybe you want to ask that one.
Who's that? I'm not sure who.
He asks all the time. I'm sick of him.
This was meant for Joseph, but in retrospect, it can be for either of you, whoever wants to answer it in terms of time. Would you say this year or last year has been more successful? Not necessarily in terms of the results, but how you've progressed as a driver throughout the year.
That's an interesting one, actually, because there's 2 ways I can kind of look at that. Like last year, the results are probably better, even though it was my first year in the championship. But at the same time, this year I've been driving a lot better in terms of, you know, making the best of what I have at my disposal, if that makes sense. So I think last year, because I think the pressure just got to me so much last year, obviously having 3 really, really strong teammates really wasn't nice, especially for the first few rounds. You know, obviously Matt Reese, Abby Pulling and Mackenzie Cresswell aren't exactly are quite hard to keep up with. So towards the end of the season, I felt like I'd really got quite close and I'd improved quite a lot. And then obviously this year I knew that I'd be the only person from last year staying in the team. So I kind of wanted to be the team leader almost. And I feel like I kind of have done that. But obviously, like I say, the results haven't been what we were expecting, that's for sure.
Can I ask just a question on that as well, Joe, just with regards to going from year to year, do you think if you had this car last year and then vice versa, that would have similar effects to the championship that you've, or the season you've been having with the results? Do you think, like, if you had your second year in last year's car, you'd be driving completely differently?
I think I'd be in the championship fight by now, I think. Obviously, the new car's quite clearly shown an effect on the grid. And obviously, JHR were one of the fastest teams last year. And it was because that car had been in the championship for, what was it, six years or something like that. No, way more than that. Must have been 8 months. So,
yeah, a long time.
Yeah, obviously, that car had been there for so long. So everyone had the perfect machinery pretty much. So it was such a level playing field. Every car was basically the same, which obviously it's supposed to be anyway, but it's never going to be first year of the championship with a brand new car. So I think if I did have last year's car, I'd be definitely up there. Obviously, I was fairly up there last year and my driving's improved big time for this year. So but obviously we didn't have that car, so kind of a bit pointless saying that. But yeah, like I say, I've been driving to the best of my ability for the whole season. So yeah, I can't be too disappointed with kind of myself in that way.
That's a really mature answer and a really good question, actually, Tom. I like that. Reece, anything you want to say, actually, with that same sort of idea of it might? I know you're racing obviously in such a different championship following F1 around the world, but in terms of your driving year on year as well.
Yeah, I think this year is probably not only in terms of a racing driver, but in terms of a person. I feel like this has been probably one of my best years. I started racing when I was 13, like I said. So I spent 3 years karting and then 2 years in British F3. So naturally, I think as I get more experience, my driving has gotten a lot better. I don't think I'm anywhere near my peak in terms of a racing driver. And above all, I think I've been learning very efficiently. You know, every round and every race, I felt like I've learned something. And you guys know very well, especially Joseph, if you're learning something in racing, you're happy. Because the worst thing is to be stuck. And definitely to be following F1 around is something super cool. And to tell all my friends, like, oh, yeah, were you watching F1? Yeah, I was there. It's pretty cool. And above all, to be on the podium this year, I think was a really good positive in terms of my own confidence to, keep learning and keep things going.
Your friends you're talking about there, are they generally an American audience who've been kind of picked up with the Drive to Survive era and all the free races you've got next year? Are they way more aware of Formula One and not most sports? I know NASCAR is just huge over in the States, but they're more aware of like the what you call European racing now.
Yeah, 100%. I was back in the Bay 3 weeks ago, and I was in New York last week. And even then, even when you speak to people before, it's like, oh yeah, I'm a racing driver. They always just thought NASCAR or some oval racing. But now the tone has definitely shifted a lot. And everyone's like, oh yeah, watch that thing on Netflix. And, people are learning a lot. And even at Silverstone, I think Silverstone's always been a big event, but I had 2 different American families that I know come and watch the race. And even at Austria, I had some American guys come, and it's definitely good in terms of the growth, and I'm really happy to see it. And even the guys I grew up in San Francisco with, it's really cool for them to, they all became car guys naturally. And they're like, wait, you race cars? And, small things like that.
Such a difference in how the whole sport's changed, isn't it? Just in such a quick amount of time as well. And there's about 5 different, I know you're racing with the British flag, but you've just got 5 or 6 different American drivers you've got in Formula 3 at the moment as well. It's wild. It's such a change. I've got questions around that, but let me just go through some of these because, like I said, the podcast isn't for me. This one is from Stiv_VF. And then Feeder Series Observer, they've added onto their Twitter bio or Twitter handle. Both of you, and let's go Joe and then Reece. Out of all the tracks on the F1 calendar, which track would you like to race on but haven't yet? I imagine racing on most of the calendar would be a big deal for you, but which one's the top of the list?
This was quite a simple one for me, actually. It's Spa, because I've never driven Spa. I've never even been there. And I've seen so many people go there and just say, oh, it's such a mega experience, stuff like that. And obviously, it's just one of the most prestigious in the world, things like that. So yeah, that's quite a no-brainer, that one, to be honest, for me.
See, for me, I feel like you're doing it, one, from a prestige point of view, but also from the fact that if you get 3 laps there, you get a long time on the track at Spa compared to do 3 laps at Red Bull Ring. How about you, Reese?
Yeah, Spa is definitely up there. I was fortunate enough to race there last year, and Eau Rouge is the craziest thing in the world. For me, personally, I think I have to go back to my roots a little bit and say Vegas. I don't, no one knows the track yet, but I feel like having a bunch of mechanics come to Vegas is probably the funniest idea you can imagine. So probably after the race, it'll be a great night.
Yeah, well, the race is on like super late, right? Well, it's super late in the UK, but it's still a nighttime race for Vegas, right?
Yeah, isn't it on the Saturday or something? It's not on the Sunday, is it? I don't think.
They know exactly what they're doing.
I presume, despite your tender years and the drinking age in the States, you've been to Vegas, being a California kid, though, at some point, Reese.
I've been to Vegas when I was young.
Yeah.
But, I've watched The Hangover enough to imagine what it'll be like.
Is it fun going back to the US and then realizing you're not allowed to drink anymore after being in the UK for so long?
I don't drink. I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, it's clever.
Yeah,
he's picking up to sponsors as well as saying how good America is for his American sponsors next year.
Yeah, I mean, got to do what you got to do,
I won't push it too far. We've got to keep the sponsors happy. This one is from Let's Go Orange. And let's go again with you, Joe, on this one. How did you find out your passion for racing? What made you want to become a driver?
Well, I started just doing a bit of rental karting with my dad. I'd go to a little 250-meter go-kart track when I was about 7. I think we started doing it. I just really enjoyed it. So we just kept going every other weekend and just have a bit of a knock around, shunt each other into barriers, things like that. And then when I was 10, my high school had a karting club associated with it almost. And it was a really low level, grassroots karting. It was dad and lad kind of stuff. You'd turn up and just with a go-kart and just go racing. And then I was doing fairly well in that. I won my first championship in it, obviously low level. So, and then obviously got the opportunity in Fiesta Juniors in 2019. Missed the first round because I wasn't old enough because I had to be 14 at the time. And then did quite well in my first year. I think it was 5 out of the last 6 rounds. Once I'd finally got up to speed, I was quite strong there. Then obviously won the championship the next year when I came back, and then that gave me the opportunity with JHR in F4 for 2021.
I will also point out, for the benefit of those who are listening rather than watching, that Joe's in a room with about 50 trophies surrounding him. He's done some set dressing before the podcast. But yeah, you've obviously had a successful old time. It's so funny as well. I've never heard of a school karting club. I know there was no karting track near where I went to school, which is always in the football team, the rugby team, that sort of stuff being in the UK. So karting one sounds awesome.
Yeah, it was. It was just a weird coincidence, really. It wasn't something that we looked for. It was just that I knew I was enjoying going rental karting, and then we saw it was there, so we were like, "Oh, let's do it then." So, I think it was £25 a weekend or something. And I wish it was like that now. That would be so lovely. But yeah, it was. I think the karting club had kind of separated from the high school. When I joined it, but about 10, 15 years ago, the playground for the key stage 3s, that used to be a little karting track that they'd do in the lunch break, things like that. It's such a cool story. But obviously then it disbanded, went into the little karting championship called NATSCA, and that's what I joined.
That is such a good initiative, though. I'd love that. So if I was at school and had the opportunity to do karting stuff, even at £25 a week, that would be amazing. It's about £25 a week for F3 each race, right, Reese?
Yeah, pretty much. Maybe just for food.
Just for the food. This question comes from Gaspard BM, and they want to know to both of you. So let's go Reese first this time. Who are your best friends in the F3 paddock and the British F4 paddock amongst the drivers?
F3 paddock. Does F2 count as well?
Why not? I mean, I'm sorry, Gaspard, if I'm just ruining your question, but I mean, we want to know who your friends are. I love these sorts of questions.
Probably the guy I speak to the most is probably Jack Doohan. We developed a relationship.
Also on the podcast last week, and obviously
also on the podcast.
Also a big reason for you to come on, right?
Yeah, definitely. Jack, we play a lot of video games together. I go hang out with him where he lives a couple times, and he's been very supportive of me. A lot of friends I had from British F3, Louis Foster, racing in the States. He's living out my American dream right now. Rafa and the team, I think Rafa and I get along quite well. Obviously, all the Americans kind of know each other, me and Jack, Kalen, Correa, I don't really speak too much, but, all those guys, Behrman and I, we do a bit of karting sometimes together. But I like to say I have quite a good relationship with a lot of the guys on the grid.
Yeah, I tend to look at this, just the idea that you guys are the age you are and get to travel around racing cars. Like, even just going for 1 week away with my friends when I was your age was just that was the biggest deal of the year. You guys, I know you're working a lot and it's still a job of sorts, but what a great time to go around. And how about you as well, Joe? It's a much smaller grid in British F4, but you've got a lot of other races there, not just the F4 grid.
Yeah, obviously your teammates are normally, they can either be your biggest rivals or your best friends. Obviously this year, with us not quite being in the championship fight for all of us, we've just been working together, so we've formed quite a good bond. Me, Georgie, Dimitri, and Noah Lyle have all got on really well this season. But kind of outside the team, I don't know. I don't really speak to that many people, if I'm honest. Probably Ed Pearson, I'd say, and Michael Shin, both from Virtuosi, I speak to a fair bit. And kind of get along with them well, but there kind of seems to be in F4 two sides of the paddock where kind of half the grid like that half and half the grid like that half as well. So I think it all comes from the rivalries and stuff like that, and obviously friendships from lower Formula as well.
A little clique club between it. That's two teams with all the teams that's going on. Is Alex done just by himself with all these points without anybody around him?
No, he's probably one of the most popular, but probably just because he's doing well.
Come on, Alex, share the wealth.
What's the setups, Alex?
Yeah. See if you can put a good word in with high tech.
Very good, very good. This one's for Reese specifically from Day, and then a bear emoji, MSC supremacy, racing car emoji. Rolls off the tongue. First of all, do I get a shout out for recommending Reese? But what has been your favourite part of racing, for example, travelling, etc.? So I presume this might mean that was wanting to get Reese on the podcast. That's the first part. So shout out to you, Day, bear emoji, MSC supremacy, race car emoji for doing that. But yeah, favourite part of racing, is it the travelling part of thing? Is it going around not drinking, going back to the States, people knowing your name?
To be honest, for me, this is a bit of a deep answer. You can have the jokey answer as well, but racing is a very privileged thing to do, so to be able to be my age and to be traveling around the world, I think that's my favorite part. And to be competing as well, because I think everything that you do in life, if you're fortunate enough to actually compete against people for it, I think that gives a lot of meaning behind life in general. So I for me to do what I do at my age is my favorite part about racing.
That is a serious. I like it though. Sounds extremely deep. You said you had something not so serious, possibly. Or did I misunderstand?
Oh yeah, breakfast wraps. It's fine. Breakfast wraps are my favorite day of my racing.
Of course, you can't do those rat racing, can you?
No, yeah, exactly.
Very good, very good. A question from Joshua Davis, esports commentator, and a question for Joseph Loake. Who is your favourite commentator?
Well, the worst thing is that I know who he is. So,
I should have asked the question without saying who it was from to start with.
Yeah, you should have just said anonymous racing commentator.
I kind of have to say him, don't I? Otherwise, I'll get beat on the air or something.
Well, I mean, you're saying I have to say it, so I think you've always ruined it. What if I was to rephrase a question and say, apart from Joshua Davis, who's your favourite commentator? And obviously, that's the only time you'd ever say anybody else's name, right?
In terms of like best commentator, in terms of adding what's the word? Excitement.
Mm-hmm.
I'd probably say Crofty in F1. He's so good at just like hyping up what's going on.
And hyping up what's not going on sometimes.
Right, yeah. Yes. That's why I said, like, in terms of adding like spice, it's good. But I guess that's why they got Brundle on there to kind of actually give some good statistics and stuff. But I guess both of them kind of work together, I guess.
Yeah. I'll tell you something though. I mean, I've done some sim commentary back in the day. It's not as easy as you think. Like, I mean, a lot of people do, and quite often rightly, I'll have to say as well, like crap on Crofty for some of his incorrections, perceived biases and so on. But how he doesn't miss a beat when calling the start of a race is a talent. Yeah. And a lot of people don't give him credit for that. You can like who you like and dislike who you dislike, but the man is extremely good at what he does, irrespective of what your personal feelings are. If you ever try and do a commentary yourself, try and commentate on the start of a Formula One race when you've not seen it before live, you will struggle. It's so difficult. So props to that answer. Not the answer I'd give, but I'd have to go with any of the commentators that have been on the podcast, of course. But of course, we also have Joshua Davis, who is terrific, especially at asking questions. We're going to move on to this question from Chiara, I believe it's pronounced. A question for Reese. And they note that they are dying to know this. When you were in high tech last year, did you and Ayumu talk in Japanese? I'm proud of you as a Japanese fan and really curious about that.
So my backstory, I was born in Orange County, which is in LA, and then I moved to Japan, and then I moved back to America, and then I moved back to Japan. In that whole process, I learned Japanese first, learned English, forgot my Japanese, had to learn my Japanese again. So my Japanese is a bit broken. I'm still in the process of relearning, but I did try to speak to him in Japanese. But you know, like when people, like, if you ever go, I mean, you would know, you're in Mexico right now. If you try to speak Spanish and some people kind of give you that look, it was like that. Me and Naima were like that. I think he respected me trying. But I think I spoke like Japan English. So me and my friends in Japan, we do this often where like every conjunction is Japanese, but everything else in a sentence is English. So we spoke like that.
I know exactly what you mean.
I'm learning it back. So I will have a full conversation one day with him.
Oh, that's great. I'll tell you something, again, another thing. I never realized until I started trying to learn Spanish how difficult learning a second language is. Yeah. It's almost, all the guests you have on the podcast, all the races, it's like almost a given. They're going to speak English. You don't ask, can you speak English? Yeah. And I feel that everybody who isn't, you know, me, Tom, Joe here, that you have the ability to speak a second language. It's like a superpower. It's amazing. And yeah, it's
naturally bilinguals. People that speak two languages are so impressive. I don't understand how you do it. I tried to learn German for 7 years, and I managed to learn hello and ni. Not even ni hao. That's a different language.
I can't speak English.
I don't know where that's come from. Like even there you go. That's what I mean. You just I'm just thinking of everyone that's gonna. Oh, my mates are gonna clip that.
Reese as well. One big thing as well. This is a massive shout out to you. I was in Thailand, and then when you're learning a language where the alphabet is different as well, that is another skill. You've got to learn. Like I can look at Spanish and have a general idea of what it's going to sound like, but how do you go about relearning at this point? Do you recognize the symbols, or is it just you're starting from blank and you just do association?
So Japanese is like the most complicated thing in the world because we essentially have the letters from Chinese and then a whole nother symbols after that. So you have to learn like two completely different symbols. Like you see like the stuff with the people with the tattoos. That's all like the complicated stuff, and we have less complicated stuff. Learning both of them is the most complicated thing in the world. So if I hear it, I can understand what people are saying. You know, so when I go back to Japan, I can understand what everyone says. It's just my pronunciation and my reading is not as good.
Yeah, listening is one skill. Writing and speaking is different. Yeah, I do Duolingo,
but
and it's
not
like
easier though.
No, it's not. When I do Duolingo and it's like I'm doing it in the moment, I can get into it because my brain sort of switches into like the basic Spanish it's got. And then I'm in a restaurant, I'm like, what's the word? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. My teammates both speak Spanish, so I'm having to like learn it because they always speak Spanish to each other. So through the back of my head, I'm learning a bit of Spanish, but
yeah, it's like learning by osmosis.
We're
we're going to run out of time. So I said we'll run out of questions, and I think there's like another 15, 20 that we're not going to get through. I'm just going to whiz through a couple more, though. This one's from Sam. They want to know, how do you think the British scene compares to the European counterparts in terms of F4 competitiveness, and then GB3 to European Formula Open and FRECA? Joe, I know it's a bit of a wide-reaching question, but what do you think?
Well, obviously I did 2 rounds of F4 UAE, and I guess in that time I kind of did get a little taster of what it's like abroad. Obviously, even though it was in the UAE, there was so many different people that are in completely different championships in F4 this year. So, and to be honest, I'd say the main difference I found is that in Dubai, people seemed a lot nicer in a way. Like on track, like it's weird.
Oh, you mean like racing specifically, not in the paddock, or?
In terms of the actual racing, it felt like in the UK, you go up the inside, you either get turned in on, or you have to go that far up the inside, you shove off on the exit, and that's kind of the way that you got to do it in the UK. But yeah, and then in Dubai, I'd done the whole season of British F4 the year before I went to Dubai. Obviously sailed up the inside of someone, forced him off on the exit, and I didn't get contested at all after it, stuff like that. I was like, what? And then like the next race, everyone did it to me and that was over. But I guess obviously I've not been abroad racing apart from that, so I don't really know any more than that, really.
Nice, some fascinating direct insight. Anything from your side of things, Reese? I mean, it's mainly been British racing you've been doing, but you're aware of all the rest of the championships.
Yeah. I have a lot of friends in Euro Formula and FRECA, and I watch all the races to kind of see who's doing well. I think definitely, like Joseph said, the aggression of everyone in the UK is a lot higher. I think it's a lot harder to get past people, especially on the tracks. But I think people in Europe are very calculated with everything what they do, especially going into FIA F3. When you're racing at the front, maybe not at the back, but at the front, everyone is very, very calculated with everything they do. So you have to think of like 700 things at once. But it's a very kind of what you imagine F1 to be, you know, in terms of like kind of very high end. Everyone thinks about things a lot. It's like that.
These are the things that I can't. Well, and Tom and everybody listening probably can't really comprehend in some regards. Like you'll watch it, and you do know there's aggressive drivers and so on. But yes, this is again fascinating insight from the cockpit. Let's go with a couple of final questions. This one's from Tejb, Tejb, via Discord. For Reese and Joseph, how do you feel your season has gone so far? I've gone through that. And are there any drivers that you look up to currently in F3/F4 and other feeder series? Joe, anybody you're looking up to potentially in the feeder series? It's always a standard one. People say, who do you look up to in F1? And say, oh, Alonso, Verstappen, Hamilton. But how about in the feeder series? That Reece Ushijima is pretty good.
Well, yeah, I've heard he's really, really good. Yeah, so I don't know. In a way, I kind of feel there's things that you can look at people in other categories and kind of respect them for, and you can learn off them. And there's always going to be things that some people are better than you at, and some things that you're better than them at. Obviously, some will outweigh the others, things like that. But I guess if you try and try and idolize other people too much, then it can kind of almost make you start trying to copy them and almost be like them. And I think if you want to get anywhere in motorsport, you've got to be yourself. And I feel like that's kind of what I'm trying to do. And I guess with the way that the world is nowadays, you've got to be so politically correct, things like that. You can't say a single thing wrong. And it almost feels like some drivers are almost robots nowadays with how they answer things like that. And I guess that's where I'll try and try and be a bit more different and try and be try and throw the odd joke in here and there. And I guess that kind of adds to your image to other people. And I'll use Lando Norris as an example. One of the most liked people just because he goes around and being a wally basically the whole time.
Yeah, I've seen a picture. It's quite funny, just this different generation of drivers. It was just like drivers back then, it's like James Hunt smoking and all this stuff. And then it's like drivers now, and it was like Charles Leclerc in the banana outfit and all that sort of stupid stuff. It feels like taking yourself less seriously is a selling feature of drivers at the moment. How about you, Reese? Is anybody I imagine you'll have a similar thing to what Joe was saying, that you don't want to idolize. Was anybody you think has done a really good job or you do look up to?
To be honest, I completely agree with Joseph, and a lot of the times I think what I've realized, having kind of a quick session through, karting to British F3 to FIA F3, you don't want to idolize people because all of a sudden you'll be racing against them. And if you're too busy idolizing them, then you won't be able to show them what you actually have. You'll hold back. And yeah, for me, I wouldn't really say I look up to anyone in the feeder series. I look up to a lot of older F1 drivers. So, people like Jim Clark, stuff like that. I like the vibe they give off, but not really anyone in the feeder series, apart from Joseph, of course, my boy.
Your inspiration since before you got into driving, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Final question then, and I'm going to have some backstory off it. This one comes from Frederick Lubin, and they wanted... I love it when a driver does that. They want to know, why won't Reese give me a sticker kit? Context, please.
Okay, so like I said, I race a lot of shifter, KZ. My current manager, he used to run a kart team called Pierce Sexton Racing. Mm-hmm. The colorway is like, everyone copied it after. It's white, blue, and pink.
Okay.
And he's been asking me for one for a year now. And I told him he wasn't going to have one. And then Jack Doon and Ollie Behrman came to race with me, and they got the sticker kit. And he was so angry. So that's the backstory. That's the sticker kit.
But
I'll get him one.
I was about to say, well, the thing was why won't you give him a sticker kit, let alone like what's the story? Well, what's this about?
Things aren't cheap. He's gonna have to order through me.
He used to buy a breakfast roll for you, and then
exactly. That's all it takes.
Well, there you have it, Frederick. We are here to help, and hopefully that sticker kit will be yours before you know it. Thank you for your question, and thank you everybody for your questions. That is all the time we have this week. Thank you for watching and listening. If you'd like to have your question asked on a future episode, use the hashtag AskF1FS on Twitter. Drop any questions below if you're watching on YouTube, or let us know what questions you have on your mind on our Discord. Look for the Podcast Questions channel. And if you are watching on YouTube, dropping a like on the video, leaving a comment, and subscribing to the channel all really helps us out. If you're listening, leaving a review on the podcast platform you're listening on is also greatly appreciated. Finally, check out f1feederseries.com for more feeder series insight, including, I believe, Tom, some written work about Williams. So that would include some F3
Yes,
stuff.
I think it went up about an hour ago.
Or 2 days ago and an hour ago, right?
Well, yeah, when it comes out. Yeah.
So some stuff about Zach O'Sullivan and Ollie Gray, I presume, is part of that. Also, follow F1 Feeder Series 1, F1 FS Americas, and F1 FS Live on Twitter. You can find the links to all of the things I just mentioned, plus the Twitter accounts for myself and everyone else on the podcast in the YouTube description or the podcast show notes. Until next time, we have been the F1 Feeder Series podcast. Goodbye.
So hot. I can't.
It is actually ridiculous. I'm in the back room at the moment, back room of my house, so it's been in the shade all day. So that's why I'm in here.
Yeah.
Here's my box of watermelon pieces. This is the leftovers of the watermelon.
This better be in the podcast, by the way. I want to see it. I want to see the Tom Evans watermelon in the podcast.
I'll have to do a review on it.